On behalf of the University of California, thank you for tuning in today for our UC Alumni Career Network webinar. My name is Anna Lowe, and I serve as the CEO of the North Jersey Federal Credit Union. I'm also a proud UC Riverside alumna, and I'm honored to be moderating today's webinar. This program is a part of a UC-wide effort to unite and support alumni across our 10 campuses. We aim to equip you with information, insights, and connections necessary to launch, grow, or expand your career. Throughout today's session, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our speaker by clicking the Q&A buttons on your screen. We will try and answer as many questions as possible during this event. Our discussion today will focus on managing student loan debt, tips for budgeting, and resources to help you reach your financial goals. A little bit about me. As a CEO of a credit union, I understand the importance of reaching financial independence and why our conversation about student debt can be so important. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you our 5 inspiring UC alumni. We have with us Amber Berry. She's a 2014 UC Davis alumna and the creator of Feel Good Finances. Amber has spent the past 5 years as a financial educator. Next, we have Sarita Gratz, serves as the Associate Director of Financial Aid at Loyola Marymount University, where she provides guidance on debt management, financial literacy, and tools for successful financial navigation post-graduation. Sarita is a 2009 graduate of UC Santa Barbara. And next, we have Rianne Sweffer Harris, attorney at Fenwick and West. Rianne works on a wide range of employment issues, including workplace investigation, harassment, discrimination, and wrongful termination of disputes. She's a 2012 graduate of UC Riverside and receives her JD from UCLA in 2015. Also joining us is 2011 UC Riverside alumnus Lavar Harris, who serves as a machine learning recruiter at Twitter. Lavar is responsible for attracting software engineer talent with a primary focus in machine learning and research. Lavar and his wife, Rianne, were recently featured by CNBC, offering their personal strategies for paying off their student loan debt, which you will have a chance to hear more about during our webinar today. And lastly, with that is Sarah Potter Gitterson. She serves as a financial wellness program director at UCLA, where she specializes in financial wellness education. Sarah is a first-generation college grad with a bachelor's degree from UC Santa Barbara and a master's degree in education from UCLA. Sarah, Rianne, Lavar, Sarita, and Amber, thank you so much for being part of today's webinar. Without further ado, let's dive into our first question. All right, so we will go in orders, if you don't mind. First question we have here is, let's start off our conversation today by hearing a little more from each of our panelists on your career journey and why this topic is so important to you. Can we start with you, Sarah?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in today on this topic of student loan navigation and financial wellness as UC alum. I started my journey, as Anna mentioned, at UC Santa Barbara, graduated from there in 2010. I went on to graduate school at UCLA, and in graduate school, I became really, really passionate about social class identity and financial wellness education. And that's when I landed my job as the inaugural director at UCLA, tasked with creating the campus's first financial wellness program that supports undergraduates and graduate students with financial literacy education and tools. I also run an Instagram account called First at Finances, which is a community for first-generation professionals to get access and education around financial literacy. And that launched in January 2021. I'm very passionate about talking about finances, about debt. Debt is one of those invisible things that we don't really know about someone unless they reveal it. So it's a big part of our identity that's somewhat invisible. And so I love to talk about this topic and bring it more to light.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. That's a lot of information, and thank you for sharing. All right, next we have Sarita.
Thank you so much, Anna, for introducing me. And I really appreciate the UC Alumni Association providing this platform, particularly on managing student loan debt. I think it's a really important topic. So my career journey started by working in the financial aid office after graduating from UC Santa Barbara. And then shortly after this undergraduate journey, I also began to take coursework in professional financial planning, or CFP coursework. And what I found working within financial aid and the CFP coursework was that a lot of the financial concepts were sometimes explained to others through the lens of the person already coming into the conversation with baseline knowledge and information and this, this higher level knowledge. And it was very formal. And so this topic is really important to me because I felt there were easier and clearer ways to educate people about educational debt and also payment management post-graduation. And then the educational factors really are determined and personal based off of the particular financial situation of the family and where you are in your career and where you are in your life. So that's where I was really excited to discuss these options more and different strategies that are available.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarita. I actually took 6 of the 9 courses for CFP, so I understand it's so important to build finances, but not everyone, go into that and realize that right away. So it's great that you realize that right away and want to help people in that area too. So thank you for sharing. All right, we have Lavar.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining, and thanks CCR for definitely kicking off this conversation. As we all can attest, it's definitely an important topic. A little bit about myself. So I graduated from UCR in 2011. Had the privilege of staying in the Pentland dorms. I think it was the first year when they were brand new. So anyone can remember that. When I first started off my career, I worked at JPMorgan Chase primarily for about 4 years, where I kind of got my crash course in like personal finance and kind of learning how big banks and lenders kind of operate and kind of rig the system to their advantage. So that's where I kind of got some good tips and tricks about how to manage student loan debt. And then after working at JPMorgan Chase, I pretty much did a career pivot when I moved to the Bay Area. And ended up working at Twitter, where now again I focus on just pretty much talent branding and the recruiters to get more people joining Twitter. Why student loan debt is so important to myself is because I see how it disproportionately affects our generation. I think our generation is one of the first to realize how wages haven't really increased at the same speed as educational costs. So finding different ways to kind of get creative and share stories about how people were able to tackle it is something that definitely needs to be had.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lavar. And I definitely agree with you. This generation seems like your student debt is so much higher than the last generation. I left with such a small amount compared to what you have at this generation. So I completely understand what you mean. Well, thank you so much. And let's go to Rianne.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to the UC Alumni Career Network for putting on this panel. As Anna mentioned, I did begin my undergraduate degree at UC Riverside, and then I went on to UCLA to complete my law degree. It was at that point that I had to take out extensive loans to, obtain my doctorate. So I had to figure out at that point, as a first generation college student, law student, like, how am I going to pay off 6 figures of debt? It's kind of my personality to always plan for a worst case scenario. And so this situation was no different. I was completely uncomfortable with the idea of being auto enrolled in the 10-year payment plan. And so I just kind of knew, and my husband was supportive of that, we had to figure out how to pay these loans off quickly. It just wasn't something we were comfortable dealing with. I was one of the fortunate ones who was able to start my career off in big law. And by fortunate, I just mean, a comfortable salary, not lifestyle. But that's one of the sacrifices we've had to make, right, in order to pay back my student loan debt. And so at this point, we're just really happy to share with anyone who's willing to listen on, our journey and how we were able to become debt free. So yeah, that's why this is important to me as well.
Thank you so much, Rianne, and we look forward to more stories from you in a minute. All right, let's move to Amber.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me and thanks for joining today. I know it's the middle of the workday and we're talking about money, but glad to be here. So my journey with student loan debt is actually, I'm a very regular person, but growing up, my parents always wanted me to go to college, but they were clear that there's only so much money they can provide and support with that. And so the way I moved through undergrad was I worked and I ended up extending my undergrad time a little bit longer, but that is what worked for me. And as I graduated and was trying to move through, I originally started in research sciences. And as I was moving through that and realized that the kind of lifestyle I want to live, which is actually pretty simple and comfortable, I wouldn't really be able to do in the little narrow industry that I was in. That's when I started learning about money and realized how much information people aren't getting and how narrow it can be sometimes, even though personal finance is very personal. We don't always have access to education like that, especially when it comes to those very sensitive moments, like how do we talk about death and money, and how do we help people who are dealing with trauma and recovering from, really abusive, toxic relationships manage money better, and how do we make sure that we're doing actually just what we want to do and the way we want to do it. And so that's what I've been exploring over the past few years, because I also, like Sarita and Anna, I've been studying my CFP classes, but they don't teach you enough about people. Like in the life insurance class, they're like, yeah, people die, so like here are their policy options. And I'm like, that's somebody's grandma. Could we be more sensitive than that? So I've been spending the past few years trying to integrate, bring more of the human side into talking about money. So I've been teaching classes casually, but also I work on the UC Davis campus. And so twice a year I teach a seminar for first year students. We talk about student loan debt and how to use credit cards, and just in a small, cozy environment, actually get their questions answered. Then I've been blogging and things on the side. So I'm trying to bring it all together. So my career is still at the beginning, but I've been enjoying the journey. So that's where I'm at. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Amber. And I was just talking to someone recently about how high school, they don't teach anything anymore about finances. While I was going through high school, senior year, we knew how to do the taxes. We talked about how to budget our checkbook, which I know that really doesn't exist anymore. But yes, those very, very basic things, but they don't teach that anymore. So I'm really happy to hear you're doing this at UC Davis, making a positive influence on the students there. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And all right, we'll move on to the second question for all of you. And our second question is understanding student debts, your student loans. What is one when it comes to managing student loan debt? All right, we'll start with Lavar here.
I think one major thing, and I really realized it when I worked at JP Morgan Chase, was that it's in the lender's best interest for you to make the minimum payment, because that extends the tenure of the loan. They're just continually making more money off that time. I can't count how many times I've seen countless examples where people say, oh, I've made the minimum payment for 10 years and it seems like I'm not going anywhere. And again, that's because the lenders purposely do that to, again, incentivize you to pay and continue to expand that loan. So really want to emphasize to take control of your own repayment process, figure out what works best for you, and then kind of work backwards from that.
Hey, thank you for sharing that, Laura. That's great information. All right, let's go to Rianne.
Yeah. So to add to what my husband said, and I promise I won't do this the whole panel, but one thing that really helped us was to avoid lifestyle inflation. So part of taking control of your repayment plan is when you start off and you get your entry level salary and you get a payment plan, or sorry, you get a monthly payment according to that. Any promotion, any bonuses you get, really practice delayed gratification, because you can use that excess money and dump it on top of your minimum payment. So that's one way that makes it feasible to avoid paying the minimum for all 10 plus years, really avoid lifestyle inflation, and just kind of be disciplined for this delayed gratification that will come afterward.
Thank you for sharing that, Rianne. That's really true. So, all right, let's move on to Sarita.
So Lavar kicked this off very well. And I also echo Rianne's comments about lifestyle inflation. I think it took a lot of, personally, it took a lot of discipline once you go through promotions and you go through different life phases to still stick to that budget that you make within the first couple of years to really stick with your plan. I also agree heavily with Lavar about making not just the minimum monthly payment, but finding that budget item, that actually creating your own budget item of what you're going to pay to the student loans, because there's no prepayment penalty for a private loan or a federal loan. And so any money that you're making on top of the minimum monthly payment is going to chip away at your interest accruals. And it's also going to chip away at the principal amount, which is the total, the actual amount of money that you took out. And so I think that that is a very good strategy, and just working within your budget of what you are going to pay, not what the lender is telling you you should pay.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarita. And this sounds like a very responsible group. Yeah. All right. Thank you. And we'll move to Amber.
So because I work with mostly first year students, but also I work on campus in general with students all the time, I'm more on the prevention end. And so when it comes to thinking about how you're going to pay for something, not just for student loans, but anytime the option comes to borrow, one thing I always tell my students is to consider what like false timelines they've put in their head, because someone made up one day that college should take 4 years, but like it doesn't have to. And I know lots of people who do it in 3. And there was someone that I worked with because they wanted to make sure they didn't have to borrow, they decided to go part-time. So it took them about 6 years, but it was much more manageable. So they took only about 2 classes per quarter, but they were able to work enough so that they also had work experience, they had extra money, and they didn't have loans when they were done. So please feel free to be flexible with how you get it done. There's not really any rules here, as long as you get done what you need to get done. And another thing a lot of students do is they don't take summer school at UC Davis. They'll take it at a community college where they can do it much cheaper. And it's a much better learning environment for them because it's smaller classes. So when it comes to managing it, it's like finding creative ways to get done what you need to get done in a more affordable way, and giving yourself whatever time you need and what actually works for you. It doesn't have to be in this very structured environment, as long as you are feeling like you're learning what you need to learn, and you're also getting the work experience that you need at the same time. There's a lot of students where the internship quarter and the heavy load quarter comes at the same time, but it doesn't have to be that way. So just be open to different ways to get done your to-do list.
Thank you so much, Amber. I think some of our audience, I'm sure, falls into that category, and it's more my husband's category too. So I totally understand. It's really understanding yourself and what direction you want to take with your own debt. As long as you're paying your debt and you're paying your student debt, or getting educated part-time 6 years, whatever works for the person. So I definitely agree. I like that. I really like what you have to share with everyone. All right, let's move over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I love that Amber took the prevention side of things when it comes to borrowing and student loan debt. I think something that is really important to just note is that we're not our student loan debt, right? We all made the best choices with the resources we had available at the time. And so I really want to take away the shame, the guilt that might be there when it comes to your student loan debt. And I think knowing your options for repayment can feel really, really empowering. So thinking about public service loan forgiveness options. If you're a teacher who works in a low income school for 5 years, you can have up to $17,500 of your loan forgiven. Also think about income driven repayment plans. Obama passed a couple awesome repayment plans called pay and repay for undergraduate and graduate students that can potentially forgive loans after 20 years of on-time payments. So really know your options that are available to you and feel empowered by that, and take time to make a plan and see your student loan payments every month, as daunting as they can feel. See it as a bill you're paying, just like your utilities or your car note. It's something that you're paying each month.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And definitely kind of same thing as Amber. I actually went to this conversation thinking I'm moderating something. It seems like a lot of people that are paying off the debt so quickly. My husband did not take that choice. I pay off because I only had a couple $1,000s for student debt, but he didn't, and he's still paying for it. He's okay with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's definitely the plan that everyone put themselves on. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's move to question number 3. Here we are about understanding interest. Sarita, can you explain how interest on loans accumulate and strategies for applying payments towards interest versus principal?
Definitely happy to help. So this is probably the least, it's a little more technical of a question, and I will do my best to explain into layman's terms what this looks like. So for federal loans, they have something called a daily interest accrual. So when you make a payment, you're making a payment, maybe before the payment deadline, but the interest every single day based off of the principal amount is still calculating and it's still accruing. So if you have a 6% interest loan with the federal government, you're getting like 0.002% of your daily interest accrual. With the private loans, it's a little more similar to like a credit card payment where they do it's a little bit more similar to that kind of interest accrual structure. And what I can say about the interest strategies that are available. So there are a couple different strategies, and particularly for federal loans, what the Department of Education has done is created a new loan simulator tool that actually allows you to go over the three different options based off of your life circumstances. So there is an area of like what the different repayment strategies are for your particular federal loans. Also, there is I'm struggling with my repayment options, and there's postponement of loans. And then there's a third loan simulator, which I think is really like kind of the new fancy tool. If I was continuing for graduate education, or if I was continuing with my educational journey, or helping your children pay for school, what is that additional loan debt going to look like? And you can actually simulate that out now. So that's really exciting and important. And I also think that the strategies are, especially during this time frame, especially during the COVID circumstances, so all federal student loans are not in repayment at all, and they are at 0% interest accruals. So you have two different strategies that are really available to you in this environment. Up until September 30th of 2021, until this year, you have the 0% environment. So if you are able and you have structured in your budget a payment to make toward your loans, you can still make payments and not be kicked into a repayment plan. So that's directly paying down the principal of the loan. And this zero interest environment can be used as a strategy if you have the circumstances available and have the tools that are available with that. Or you could also use it for family. You can use it for your other expenses, whatever works. But that is an option to lower the amount of debt, also lower the interest accruals in total, and lower the lifetime that you're paying the loan. There's also a consolidation option that allows you to take your private loan debt and consolidate it into the federal loan debt. So that way you can take advantage of the 0% interest environment up until September 30th. So that consolidation has been a really good tool to allow people to still stay current on their loans and not just stop payments and forget about it. Because I'm never really a proponent when I'm speaking with people about stopping a repayment plan. There usually are other areas other repayment plans and other options that are available to help students still navigate the process and pay down the debt as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much, Sarita. That was a lot of information, but I'm sure those that are currently paying, they're happy to hear about all these different loans simulators, student loans, what you mentioned to help them figure out what category do they fall under, how do they want to pay their loans. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing about the, loans that are like credit cards and loans that are like simple, interest. So thank you so much. All right, let's move over to the next question on budgeting. Sarah, if you can help us here with budgeting is a big part of managing debt. What advice and tools do you recommend audience members implement to set a budget and stay on track?
Hi, Anna. Yeah, I am a huge fan of keeping a budget. I think one of the things I see first with students or clients that I work with is that they see a budget as restrictive, as daunting, as holding them back from potentially living life. But I really like to change that mindset into thinking that a budget allows you to be in the driver's seat, and it allows you to tell your money what to do instead of money just happening to you and coming at you in life, right? You have a plan, you feel empowered to not just maybe spend less, but also take away the guilt if you want to treat yourself to something because you know it's within your budget. And so there's a couple methods that have been popularized out there. The first that's actually really widely used was created by Elizabeth Warren and her daughter, who wrote a book together called All Your Worth. And in this book, they popularized a method that a lot of financial advisors use called the 50-30-20 rule. And this method is 50% of your income goes to current needs, 30% goes to wants, so those treat yourself moments, and then the remainder, the 20%, goes to saving and investing for the future. So a lot of folks like to follow those guidelines, right? And I think it also depends where you're living in the United States and the cost of living in the city you're in. So with that in mind, I also like to suggest a 70-20-10 rule. So the 70-20-10 rule means 70% of your income goes to current expenses. So that includes wants and needs. 20 goes to past you. So that's student loan debt, maybe consumer debt you might have, medical bills that you're paying off. And then 10% goes to future you. So that's saving, investing for your future. Now, ultimately, the goal is that one day that 20% that's paying off past you gets added to future you so that you're saving and investing 30% of your income. Again, these are just guidelines. Life happens, things happen, but these are parameters that I suggest. Also, there's some really great budgeting apps out there that I'd like to recommend. I think one of the most popular is Mint. That's one that I've used for a long time. And there's also one out there for couples called Honeydew, and that's spelled Honey and then due, like a bill is due. And what's really cool about that is depending on how a couple budgets together, it allows you to have your joint accounts, your separate accounts, all visible and shareable in one space. Also, if you're someone who's maybe living with roommates right now or family members, Spendy is a great app to divide expenses and see what you're working with. UNAB, You Need a Budget. That app is really great if you're paying off debt and you're really wanting to get in a place where you're attacking that debt. Every Dollar is another good one. It's very, very detailed down to like the cent of everything you spend your money on. So that's a good one for people who like to track every little bit of everything. And then if you're someone who's maybe at the point where you have a little more assets like property, investment accounts, Personal Capital is a really great app for that as well. So these are just a few. There's probably hundreds, if not 1,000 other apps out there, but really toy around with it and see what works best for you and your lifestyle.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sarah. I was thinking about the Honeydew, more like a list for my husband, but but yes, I think I'll look into this. We got married a little bit older. We never joined our finances. It's more like, hey, you take this bill, I'll take this one. So this is very interesting. I didn't realize. I was just thinking this is too much work. So this is great that there's these apps out there. And I really like your 70-20-10 rules, because when you first says the 50-30-20. I was thinking, I don't know too many people that live in Los Angeles or even in California that can afford just at 50 to pay all their monthly bills. So I like your 70, 20, 10, and I hope the audience also enjoys that. Thank you very much. All right, so to the audience, in a few minutes, we'll begin addressing questions from today's audience. Please remember to submit your question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens or by emailing alumni@ucop.edu. Now, this part, I get to share a little bit about myself. So the reason why I didn't really have any student debt, I joined the Army at 18, signed up for the GI Bill because I didn't know how to pay for college. So I think everyone has a different way of doing this. And like Amber said earlier, just a different ways of doing things. And so like I mentioned, I took the college course in the summer, and that's where my couple $1,000 debt came from. And I paid off right away because I didn't want to have to think about my debt when I'm ready to do other things with my money. But I'm married to another very proud UCL grad. My husband went to UCLA undergrad and UC Davis for law school. And he's still paying his little bit of $250 a month. I know he probably doesn't want me to tell all of you, but $250 a month, but I asked him, why we can afford to pay this off? Why don't we just pay this off? He's like, I was like, okay, if that's how you feel about it, I'm not going to touch it. That's why I think go back to what Ember said. Everyone's different. He's okay with paying his 2%, I think. I think that's the last time I asked him, it's about 2%. He's okay with paying 2%, and so be it. That's his debt. I'll let him do it his way. But yeah, it's so good to hear what everyone is doing here, and to see just so many different ways to handle your student debt. And definitely no shame in taking your time, like my husband. I joke with him here and there, but really, it's just a number for him. It's come out of his paycheck. So, but thank you all for sharing. And with that said, let's go into the next question. All right, question 5 is tools and resources. Amber, if you can help us here. Increasing monthly payment is one way to reduce the overall amount one pays. Can you offer any resources or websites that might help an audience member calculate these payoff differences or help support their efforts to become debt-free?
Sure. So I actually, I have like 2 groups of 2 resources. So the first one, I'll just maybe not so much a resource, but 2 different perspectives. When you're paying off debt, especially if you're a social person and there's a lot of opportunities to do other things with your money, like I know people are going to the streets this summer, and that's fine if you're vaccinated and everything and you're going to be safe. But that means you're going to have to make decisions again about like how often you're going to go out to eat and what you're going to do with your friends when you go out. So a topic I like to think about is financial self-care. And part of that is boundaries. So what are you willing to consider? It's like, if I spend this money because I want to go to the club, which do you, I don't care, but what is the opportunity cost of that? Like, is it worth it to set yourself back a little bit? And sometimes it is. It was just a rough week at work, and that's fine. But just be aware that with the resources you have, what kinds of decisions do you need to make? If you are a person who normally likes to go all out for the holidays and spend lots of money on people, you may have to tell yourself, for the next 2 years, I'm just going to do cards because I really want to make some progress on my loans. And are you willing to communicate that to people? And hopefully they'll support you for the next couple of seasons. It's just so that you can catch up on things and give yourself some breathing room. So whatever your boundaries are with spending and fun, just be aware of that and be willing to practice communicating with that. And hopefully your community will be supportive with that. But the other thing with boundaries is how restrained are you going to get before you ask for help? Sometimes people wait until the whole bottom has fallen out of their life. You don't have to do that. It could be like, if I get to a point where I'm just having trouble keeping up with my bills, or I'm having trouble staying organized and making sure I'm paying things, I'm going to go get some support. And for a lot of us, there are free resources at your campus that you can get. And there's lots of low-cost resources and free resources as well. So something to consider. And the other thing that I talk to my students about a lot is the seasons of your financial life. Sometimes they call it the stages of financial life planning. But for some people, the first couple years after undergrad, that's just their hustle season. I went through this. I had 4 jobs at once. I don't recommend it, but like I did it. And like I know a lot of students who do that too. And they're just trying to this is while they have the energy, and they don't need as much sleep, they are going to work as much as they can to start saving money, try to get a little bit ahead on their loans, and then be aware that that's not necessarily sustainable. So maybe do that for a couple years, but make sure you take a break. And as you transition out of that, maybe you will continue to do hustle seasons, but it's just a season. Like maybe just summer and winter, you'll do like some seasonal work, but then you'll make sure you rest in the other, what is that, fall and winter? So something like that, just to make sure you don't burn yourself out. So consider what your seasons are and considering what your boundaries are, especially as we're all getting back to more excitement. And then two, tools that you can use to help you with more of the numbers part of your student loan debt. Studentloanhero.com is I like that website. They have a lot of very digestible blog posts. If you want to read about money that's not in a textbook and not like super boring, there's like cool pictures on there and things like that. But they also have calculators. So if you wanted to look at different repayment options, like in a chart, it's like if I did income-based repayment, or if I did repay, or if I did the pay, like if you wanted to see them all compared in a chart, that's a really good resource. And that website is free as well. And another tool that I like, it's called Undebt. So UNDEBT.IT. And that one's really fun. It's also free, but they do have a premium one if you wanted to do more features. If you wanted to calculate what it would look like if you did avalanche versus snowball versus I'm just going to do what I can and then add extra money here and there, Undebt is a really good tool for that. This is something that I try to encourage my first years to do. I'm like, before you decide to borrow something, let's reverse engineer how much is this going to cost later. So if you're thinking about borrowing, and this is something a lot of us have experienced, whenever you're like, oh, I want to go borrow for a car, they're not going to tell you how much it's going to cost later. They're just like, do you want this loan? So if you want to see, if you were to plan it out, like, oh, this is the loan terms, how much I'm borrowing, what the interest rate is, what does this actually look like, and how would that fit into my plan? And if it feels tight before you do it, it's a good opportunity to pause and reconsider. But if you do want to play with what it would look like if you added extra money to your payments, or if you wanted to try to condense it, it can give you like down to the month and the year when you would be out of debt. And you can put in any kind of debt in there. It'll help you calculate the interest rate. So if you want numbers, but you don't want to program a spreadsheet, highly recommend Undebt. So those would be my recommendations for y'all.
Wow, thank you so much, Amber. I'm just thinking back to I graduated in 2000. I know a little bit of a stone age for some of you, but yeah, I think back to all my friends, we didn't have things like this. And I remember buying homes. My friend was going to go buy a $3,000, his monthly income was 33. He was willing to buy a home for 3,000 because that's what everyone was doing. I was like, whoa, that's a little crazy, but so things like this and someone like yourself educating people on this is, they're grateful for people like you. Because I talked my friend out of buying that house. So I was like, wow, that's incredible. The loan was, back in the days, loans were so loose as far as the way they fund those loans, anyone could have qualified. So I wish I should actually still introduce him to Undebt.it. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. All right, let's go to question number 6 for Lavar and Rianne. All right, your personal experience, please share with us. What was your journey like? How much above the minimum did you pay monthly to your student loan to become debt-free? What changes did you make to prioritize your financial goals?
Cool. So yes, I'll kick things off. I'll let Rianne speak on like the actual specifics of how we structured our finances, but wanted to kind of first give a backstory on how kind of our story came together. So Rianne and I both went to UCR together. We met in my senior year, 2011, and then got married in 2015, so 4 years afterwards. Full disclosure, actually didn't have any student loans when I graduated UCR, but Rianne was very transparent saying that she was going to have some, and obviously we dated during law school where she said, tacking on quite a few more. So it was a conversation we were always very comfortable having, which kind of made it easier, of course, when we got married to combine our finances to say, okay, well, this is going to be a student loan debt that we're going to tackle together. It's never just you. We're going to put our finances together and figure out a way that we can achieve our finances together. So by no means do I want to turn this into like a relationship coaching ceremony, but more so I want to kind of speak on that because everyone's story is a little bit different. But yeah, so the way that we were able to do that helped allow us to kind of figure out like what's going to be our primary focus when we get married. We actually initially were paying minimum on Rand's loan so we could buy a house first. And then of course, once we got the house, then we kind of went full throttle into kind of making sure we pay off that debt. And of course, Rand will go into specifics. But also due to how we kind of structure our finances, I was able to go back and get my MBA without taking on additional loans because of how we were very disciplined in how we were structuring our finances. So Rand, definitely feel free to kind of take them through how exactly we were able to do that.
Yeah. So we spoke about lifestyle inflation a little bit earlier, and we understand also that sometimes it's not necessarily lifestyle inflation, but very real, inflation with people paying rent and other things that are just out of your control, right? So to my husband's point, we did kind of make the decision initially to pay the minimum on our loans because we were living in the area at the time and the housing prices were increasing rapidly. So we made a decision like, okay, we can't rely on this like unstable rent. We need to, purchase a home, and then we kind of have this like set monthly payment. So we did the non-traditional FHA route, which is like a 3% down payment, which is great for first-time home buyers and people who have, a lot of debt. I still had 6 figures of debt at this time. We were able to qualify. So that was one of the ways that helped us kind of control some things we could control. From there, my minimum payment, full transparency, was quite high initially. I believe it was $1,200 coming out of law school. And so then going forward, every bonus I received, every promotion I received, the excess went to my student loan. So by the end, I want to say we were paying about $3,500 a month. So that's, incredibly steep. But again, we didn't want to take the 10-year route. We wanted to cut that in half at least. Decision we made, at the outset of our marriage. And again, everyone's journey is personal. So we do understand a lot of our generation are not married largely in part because of the student loan debt. But it was just a decision we were comfortable making together. Like, okay, I understand, from my husband's perspective, he's marrying into debt. So he had the short end of the stick. The way we were able to approach it was like, I'm going to use the majority of my income to focus on my repayments, and we could rely on his income and kind of pare our lifestyle down where we could be supported by one salary. So that was kind of our approach. And yeah, that's how we were able to do it essentially.
Thank you both for sharing your journey. And I don't think lavar got the end of the stick. End of the day, your income in the long run as an attorney will, it will double faster than most people. So,
yeah.
And so don't worry about lavar. He's fine. But yes, thank you so much for sharing. And, $3,500 is very steep. And $1,200 is not cheap either. So I think you two made the great sacrifice doing that now, so you don't have to worry about that. Especially you're married, you might be thinking about starting a family. Kids cost a lot of money, and you got to start saving for them. So I think you made the best choices for what suits both of you. So you did the right thing for yourself. So perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so now we're moving on to more questions from our audiences. We have a number of questions coming in from our audiences. And the first question comes from, let's see, for Sarah. All right, this question, Sarah. Let's see, can you talk more about public service loan forgiveness? Who qualifies? How do we get on the right track for loan forgiveness repayment plan?
Great question. This is something that can be a little bit tricky. And I have some tips and tricks for navigating public service loan forgiveness. So anyone who works for a public service 503c nonprofit, if they're going into law enforcement, firefighter, becoming a public defender, these are all public service types of work that could qualify you. And you can go and speak with your lender, and you can ask if your source of employment and where you work can qualify as a public service loan forgiveness employment for qualifying for this. So that would be one step to see if you qualify based on where you work. The second step is if you make 120 on-time payments, which is 10 years of paying on time, you could potentially qualify for forgiving the remainder of your loan that is left. So with public service loan forgiveness, I saw a question in the Q&A about being taxed. So with public service loan forgiveness, you are not taxed on the remaining amount. With the Obama pay and repay plans, where you can be forgiven on student loan debt after 20 to 25 years, that can potentially be taxed. So I think that's a big distinction to make. And another tip I would put out there is after the 120 payments are done, make sure that you fill out the form with your lender where you're asking to have the remainder forgiven. Now, if you have not verified your place of employment every single year through your lender, and this can be done through usually your HR department where you work. If you have not done that every year, at the end of the 10 years, you're going to have to go back to every place you have worked that qualifies as public service and get that verification. So it's a little bit easier just to do it every year as you go so that you don't have to go back, hunt down your old, boss or your old HR rep where you used to work and get that signed off. So that's for public service loan forgiveness. Now, like I mentioned briefly before, if you're a teacher and you're going to work at a low income school for 5 years, and there's a list of schools that qualify, your loans could be forgiven up to $17,500 after 5 years of working at that school. So I think that's something else to really focus in on and try to apply for. Again, speak with your lender, make sure you're getting all the right forms. Studentaid.gov is a great website for more information about these different types of forgiveness plans, and really see what you have out there to qualify for. Because if you can have a big chunk of that debt forgiven, that would really, really help. And then Anna, I don't know if this would be the right time, but I also saw a lot of questions about what's up in the air right now with forgiveness under the new administration when it comes to loans. And so that we know really as much as you know, from the research I've done, we're still waiting on the answers. So there's some talk where folks are pressing 50,000 to be forgiven. Some folks are pressing for 10,000 to be forgiven. A lot of the talk is centered around undergraduate loans, and I know a lot of folks are advocating to also include graduate student loans. So it's still up in the air. We're still in limbo, and we're hoping to get more information soon.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Actually, I clicked on the questions too, and I think there were a lot of questions about loan forgiveness. So I'm appreciative of you covering all these. And I'm going to go do a little research because my husband actually works for the public sector. He probably doesn't even look. So, he's an attorney who just doing his thing. So yeah, thank you so much for this information. I really appreciate it. All right. So we have another question in, and this one, Sarita, if you can take this one. This question is from Corey, and he would like to know at what loan percentage should debt be paid off as soon as possible as opposed to investing the money?
That is an excellent question, and I would like to kind of give the preface that it's really going to be dependent on your budgetary plan and your family circumstances. There's no tried and true percentage of, if you pay, 15% as opposed to, 10%, you're gonna get a better value. It's really based on your income and your family circumstances. What I can recommend is once you have created that family budget and looked at your different expenses and followed, I like Sarah's the 70-20-10 rule that she advised, that is a great resource and a great way to structure your budget and kind of where you're thinking about money. So once you have kind of that framework and that structure, you can then look and see, okay, this is our minimum monthly payment. This is what I have to pay. But what above that as what's considered a prepayment, what above that can I reasonably afford that is going to take down my income, but also fit in with my other obligations and my other life circumstances and life goals. Because this is really your personal journey. And so again, I can't say, pay 15%, but you can find that restructuring in that budget once you kind of set that framework.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarita. I was just thinking about the 70-20-10 rule, like you mentioned and Sarah mentioned, when someone pays off of that 20%, they start paying off some parts of that. Maybe then they could take that 5% and they're now at 15%. They can then take that 5% to do the investment. So I think that's where you can lean, depending on their budget, depending on how much you have paid off. It really depends on their circumstances and their risk tolerance and everything to that extent too. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think it just depends on the situation, the person. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right, now we have the next question, and Samantha has a question for Amber. All right, Amber. Samantha asks, my rent goes up more every year than my annual wage. What advice can you offer to help me stick with a repayment plan?
Oh, that's rough. But that is also the reality of a lot of people. So first perspective is you're not the only person going through that. And where you can in other areas, seek out support from community programs. And there's also ways you can investigate this like anonymously if you don't want people to know it's you. Like 211 is a fantastic resource. They know all the things about all the things. You can call them and ask like what options are available for maybe reducing your electric bills, or sometimes you can qualify for rental assistance. I know that's something that's going on like right now in my area near Sacramento. One way to like save a little bit of money. I'm a volunteer tax preparer. So like if you want to save a few $100s, you can take advantage of programs like that. So there's lots of like one-time things you can do to like squeeze out a little bit to kind of help you. But yeah, that's a really tough thing. Aside from the small things, it would be trying to plan out on a bigger scale how you can find a way to earn more income without stressing yourself out too much. It can be, I wish it was more straightforward than that, but it's like, yes, we can work more, but there's only so much a person can work before it becomes exhausting. So where you can, I would say the first thing to do would be to find any sort of community support or like negotiating your bills just to get a little bit of wiggle room. And then where you can, find ways to increase your income, whether that's career pivot, if that's what you want to do, or if it's just finding supplemental income from some other source, which that particular situation of trying to keep up with the rent is just super rough. So hopefully as you get to make a bigger dent on your debt, like getting that reduced, that will hopefully help with, get you some more wiggle room, hopefully. But yeah, that one's a really tough situation.
Thank you so much, Amber. I don't even know how to answer that question. So that's a pretty good answer, because I just think about how can we make more money when the bill's going up so quickly. And I think that's why a lot of people move out of California, because of they can't afford the home prices, they can't afford the rent prices, and especially the Bay Area right before pandemic, it went haywire. So unfortunately, sometimes people have to make the sacrifices of moving out of the area they love. And but I'm not advising that. I'm just saying sometimes they're just hard sacrifices, or cut out some of those going out money, unfortunately. And that's why budgeting is so important. So yeah, definitely, that was a really hard question. I was waiting for your answer to see how you answer that one. So, thank you very much. All right, so our next question is for Rianne and Lavar. This is from Calvin. Calvin would like to know, what do you do when your partner does not have the same saving and investing habit as you? That's a tough one.
I could start. I'm a little more like logical in a lot of the way I see things. So I think you have to decide whether or not that's a deal breaker for you, right? I don't think it's fair to you or your partner to hold that type of resentment. Money is a very big deal. It's one of, the 1 and 2 indicators, if you were to walk down the aisle, right? It's an indicator of divorce for a lot of people. So I think that if you have, assuming you've reached out to your partner and you've sat down and you've discussed how important this is for you, If not, I would have that conversation, right? No one can read each other's minds. But if you've had that conversation, if your family and friends are on the same page and it's just your partner who seems very resistant for their own reasons, there could be some things that that individual needs to resolve within themselves, right? It could be different traumas that they've experienced growing up in a particular situation. Like, we never truly know someone's backstory. So it could be that you have to take a break from that person, to get yourself together first, meet your goals that you have set for yourself. And it could be that you can come back together, or like I mentioned, it could be a deal breaker. But I don't think you can have a relationship with someone and feel fulfilled when you have such a great difference between something that's so important, such as money, right? I think that you really have to be on the same page for the long term, for the success of the relationship in the future. I don't know if my husband has a softer approach to that or not.
I don't know
but-
how he feels about you. Totally. You're more logical, but no, definitely. I like what you share, Rihanna. And Lavar, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely a little softer. In terms of, so relationships are all about compromise. So of course you have these specific goals and achievements that you want to accomplish, but I think it's important to sit down with your partner and understand what they are looking for first, and then find a way if you can meet in the middle. And then of course, if you focus on longer term goals, then the little things that it takes to get there are a lot easier. So don't focus on paying off the debt, more so say, okay, we both want to buy a house. In order to buy a house, this is what we have to pay off in order to do that. So it breaks it down into little smaller digestible chunks, as opposed to just saying, no, I don't want to spend my entire direct deposit on paying off student loans because that's not fun. But again, when you focus on the actual goals of buying a house or going on vacation or other financial goals, it's a lot easier to do. So compromise is definitely going to be key. But so that's my softer approach to that question.
I like both of your answers. It's fantastic. And I really like yours too, Lavar. I think definitely not trying to be a marriage counselor, but money is such an important topic in a relationship. It really is. I was 30 something when I met my husband. I was 35. And one of the first questions I was like, what's your FICO score looks like? Sounds kind of silly, but if you're not in the 800, we're not talking, because money is important to me, meaning I don't want to pay his debt. I don't want him to be responsible for not my debt. But if the couple decide that's okay, that is okay. But definitely it's something that, like Rihanna said, needs to be discussed. And I think sometimes some people don't have the financial goals. My husband didn't believe in buying homes. Now we have several homes. But that's the thing. I say, hey, if you do this, this is what we can do. So I think you have the end goal really does help put the relationship on the right track. So both of your answers are excellent. And I like the left brain, right brain, logical, non-logical. I'm not really sure, but it's great answers. Thank you both very much. All right, so let's move on to the next question. This one's for Sarah. Sarah, this is from Emily. Emily would like to know, how should I go about figuring out how big of a loan to take out? I want to be sure I request enough to cover my living expenses on top of my tuition.
I love this question. And I think it goes back to the prevention piece that Amber was speaking about earlier in this webinar. Really creating a budget to know how much your living expenses are every month is essential for knowing exactly how much you need to borrow, right? So one thing we can't change is the cost of tuition. So we know that will be the baseline amount that needs to be borrowed. And this is if you haven't been able to maybe secure a scholarship or a fellowship. Always look for those about a year in advance. Start with your academic department to see if there's any sort of tuition remission opportunities to take care of that piece. So we know that as a standard, if you don't have those grants or scholarships or fellowships, will be how much you have to take out for the year. And then creating a monthly budget, seeing how much your rent, your expenses are for utilities, food, and really then timesing that by 9, right? So when we get a financial aid award letter in the UC system, that's for 9 months or 3 quarters. So really timesing by 9 how much your monthly expenses are, and knowing, okay, for the academic year, I'm going to need to borrow this amount. Now, I will say, if there's an emergency that pops up, right? And maybe you borrowed $7,000 out of the $10,000 offered to you in an unsubsidized or subsidized loan. and you need to go back and borrow more, you can always go back to your financial aid office and you can say, hey, an emergency popped up. I need to tap into an extra 1,000K out of what I was offered and get that. Financial aid officers like if that happens up until in the quarter system up until week 8, so that they have time to process it and handle all the paperwork. I'm seeing Sarita nod her head over here in agreement. But really it comes down to making a budget. You do not have to borrow everything that is offered to you at once.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. All right, we have one more question here for Sarita. Sarita is from Isabel. She'd like to know what payments made during the pause on loan payment still go towards the principal if there is an unpaid interest balance.
That is an excellent question. So if there was an unpaid interest balance, all of the payments in general are going to go first toward the interest and then toward the principal amount. So if you're making a prepayment during this pause period, it will still operate under the same framework where it's going to pay down the interest first and then start chipping away at the principal. If you've gotten down to 0 interest by making these payments during the pause, then it just 100% goes to the principal amount. But I will say that with the pause and this balance, so all of under traditional repayment plans, there is a certain percentage amount that when you first start with a loan, there's a certain percentage amount that just goes toward the interest, and then a very, very small amount when you're in the beginning stages of the loan that goes toward the principal. And eventually, as you go through the life of the loan, that kind of formula changes and flips to you paying more in principal and paying less toward the interest. We're in a very unique circumstance right now where, if you make a prepayment during this pause, like you're just chipping away as much as possible toward the interest, and then you can go 100% into the principal. So the formula of like what percentage of principal and interest that you're actually paying has kind of been out the window during this payment pause.
All right, thank you so much, Sarita. So this next question is for Sarah and Sarita. So we will start with Sarah, since Sarita just answered the question. All right, this is from Alexandra. Alexandra would like to know, if you have to take out private loans, how can you identify trustworthy companies? Sarah?
This is a really, really good question. And I would say that this really impacts folks who don't qualify for federal student loans under the FAFSA and have to tap into private lenders. I think one great way that you can kind of research a private lender is always look them up on the Better Business Bureau. Look up what their ratings are. Look up reviews of that company. See what people say. I always advocate, I'm a huge fan of credit unions. So if you're going to take out a loan, look at credit unions. Anna's loving that one as someone who runs a credit union. Check with them. They tend to have lower interest rates. They tend to be able to work with you on repayment options. And they have a really good mission when it comes to financial education and giving back to the community. So start with credit unions, see if you qualify there. A lot of private loans will also require a co-signer. So make sure, I see a lot of international students struggle with this who may not know someone in the US that can co-sign with them. So those are things to also look at and be aware of. But yeah, look them up on the Better Business Bureau. Look at the interest rates they're going to charge you. Look at when the student loan will need to be repaid. So some private loans will ask that you actually start repaying them while you're still a student. So you'll want to see if there's any sort of leeway with the timing of when you can begin repaying as well. So that would be my best advice.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for advocating for credit unions. And all right, let's go to Sarita, if you can help out with this question. Thank you, Sarita.
Of course, and thank you, Sarah. Those pieces of advice are very sound and solid. I also think one area that students, if you are taking a private loan, is actually going to the financial aid webpage of the institution that you're at. Most of the institutions, or at least the institutions that I've been involved with, have a private lending site and have an area particularly of private loans that they have vetted. And one of the responsibilities as the financial aid office is to make sure that the other outside third party lenders that we are putting on our website are vetted, have a sound business model, have a way to basically guarantee the loan debt and make sure that it's not just you being left out on a limb. And a lot of these resources in terms of looking at the repayment options and whether the loan is at a fixed rate, which means that it's one interest rate for the life of the loan, or it's a variable rate. So it's kind of going up and down accordingly with the market. Um, that's also available on financial aid websites. And also, whether loans have special stipulations, if you need to be enrolled half time to be able to take this loan, if you need to pay what's called a past due balance, maybe you had something in another semester, you need to see whether that's taken care of. So all of those details, it does sound like a lot of information, but I guarantee that the financial aid office will have links with vetted resources to be able to kind of help navigate through that process and provide all of that information.
All right, thank you so much, Sarita. Thank you and Sarah for these great answers. And if I was a student, I'll be very interested to know these things too. So thank you very much. All right, we have another question here. This is for Amber. Amber, can you talk about how you found work-life balance when working and going to school at the same time?
Oh, I didn't. I've only gotten better at it like as I get older. So the work I do on campus, like my day job is I teach students how to drive buses. Like at UC Davis, the bus system is driven by students. So we talk about this a lot. Part of it is scheduling, which I've gotten better at over the years, and teaching them how to block schedule, how to tell the truth to themselves about whether they're a morning person or not. Some of my trainees are like legitimately nocturnal and they just don't show up when we schedule morning shifts. So like helping them understand what their natural patterns are and try to work around that. Even though we do work during breaks, as students, they're not required to. So just making sure we try to teach them, like, make sure you're taking breaks, make sure you try to take like at least one day off of work to just go be a human and go do whatever you want to do with your friends. I also try to teach them, like when finals week come, we try to structure the quarter so that when finals weeks come, like they don't have to work so much, they can just focus on exams. And just trying to help them learn their rhythms and figure out a structure for their schedule that works for them. But it's a journey, like, and the hardest thing for me personally is once I got a schedule going, it was usually like week 8 of the quarter, and then it was finals, and then the schedule changed. So that's another thing to be aware of. Like, if the quarter system is too fast for you, it personally is for me, it would be reasonable to be like, as much as I love learning here, I'm going to self-destruct if I keep trying to squeeze myself into the quarter system, working or taking like a full load. Maybe I could try it part-time. And if that doesn't work, maybe I need to consider a school that does semester, because I'll just have more time to breathe and be a human. That's totally fine. And also the good thing about the job work, the particular department that I work in, is we're super flexible, and like you just schedule with your trainer. So if anything comes up with my trainees, we can just make adjustments there. So I think it's important that you find a job, hopefully it's a job you like doing. That definitely makes a difference. The trainees generally enjoy driving double-decker buses and all sorts of things like that. but also something that's going to acknowledge that you're a student and you're trying to grow and learn how to be a human, learn how to be a student, and learn how to be an employee and live with strangers, which is horrible. That's an entire other category that a lot of us don't need. So there's a lot going on. I had some dorm mates my first year who worked at the local grocery store. And that was a horrible experience for them because they'd ask for about 15 hours a week and sometimes they get scheduled 30. And it was just way too overwhelming. And so if you can find a job on campus that is like, yes, we know your students, we know that you need breaks, we know that you can only work so much, that tends to be a good place to start. But yeah, please just tell the youngins to figure out what their truths are. Do they work well in the mornings? Some people, because we also have options for weekend shifts, some people do most of their shifts on the weekends, or they do most of their shifts like towards the end of the week at night, and that works for them. So if they can find things that are flexible for them, I'd encourage them to do that where they can, so that they can kind of figure out what works for them as they're trying to figure out what will work for them later on as well in their professional lives.
Thank you so much, Amber. I'm cracking up here. I swear I'm still nocturnal, but most of the job nowadays require me to be wake up 7 a.m. kind of thing. So, and having a kid, that kills that one. So, Sarita, yeah. So thank you so much. Yeah, I think it really discovering themselves. And for a job, I don't know how any work-life balance is really a thing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. All right, we have another question here for Sarah. This is from Alex. Alice would like to know, I'm hoping that there will be some kind of student loan relief bill passed. So I'm waiting on making payments. Can you offer your thoughts on that approach?
Alex, I am doing the same thing. So I think that for me, that made most sense. I know you can go the approach of making extra payments during this time of zero interest and whatnot to kind of attack that loan. But I'm really lucky that what I have remaining is just under 10K. So I'm waiting it out just to see if there is some sort of relief bill, because I'd rather pump that money into savings or my investment accounts and try to grow my money that way. I also highly recommend high yield savings accounts. If you're a little hesitant to begin investing, that's a great way to grow your money in a savings account. But I'm pumping that payment into those avenues right now. And then we'll see what happens by September 30th to see if it is forgiven. So Alex, I'm doing exactly what you're doing. Hold off, let's wait and see, let's hope, right?
Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, I have one last question and we're going to go right into closing statements. So this last question is for Lavar and Rianne. Can you share with us, is it possible to live frugally and still have fun, to be debt-free?
So I call myself the king of frugality. My wife may have a different answer, but I have an amazing time cutting costs. So the easiest way to increase your bottom line is essentially by cutting costs. So perfect example, my wife and I still drive the exact same cars that we did when we graduated college, despite, of course, changing jobs, getting promotions. I still drive a Nissan Altima. She drives a Ford Focus. A lot of our peers have luxury cars, especially in California. It's a very popular thing to have a very luxury car. So little things like that definitely go a long way. Also, so credit card rewards is how we really were able to kind of enjoy the journey. So working at the bank, I kind of was able to kind of learn that credit card companies will pay you to essentially use their card. And as long as you're disciplined to pay off that balance at the end of the month, they're essentially paying you just to use the card. So we were able to kind of travel the world by putting like our everyday purchases on credit cards, but again, specifically calling out to pay it off right away. So that was kind of what made it fun. And also just having a partner along the way. Obviously, if it's a spouse, it's amazing. If it's a friend, a family member, just having someone you can kind of celebrate those small wins with goes a very long way. So that way you don't feel like you're tackling it by yourself, because any kind of isolation can be very daunting in trying to pay off something of that magnitude.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to acknowledge the joy on my husband's face when answering that question. But for me, what really helped was redefining my values in life and what brought me joy. And for us, we realized that having experiences together was more valuable and more of a sustainable way to be happy than to consume, right? Especially in such large quantities. So like you mentioned, the credit card points, we kind of just had an agreement amongst ourselves, like throughout the year, we're not going to cash in any of these, and then we're going to use them towards flights and hotels and take a vacation. That was a way to kind of reward ourselves at the end of the year.
Thank you, thank you, Lavar, and thank you so much to the both of you. And I'm just going to go into a closing statement because I think we're out of time. So thank our panelists for being with us today. And let me go into the closing remarks. All right. Thank you all very much. All right. On behalf of the University of California, thank you for joining us today for our UC Alumni Career Network webinar. I'd like to thank Amber, Rianne, Lavar, Sarita, and Sarah for their time, generosity, and commitment to the University of California. The insights and advice you each shared today made me especially proud to be a part of the UC community. It was a pleasure to connect virtually with each of you today. We appreciate you making time to be part of today's event and hope you have gained valuable advice to help you reach your financial goals. Please take a few minutes to provide feedback on today's event by following the survey link, which appeared in your browser when you launch today's webinar. The feedback you provide will help the organizers select topics for upcoming sessions. We hope you will join us on April 19th for our next UC Alumni Career Network webinar on navigating racism and career advancement. Please visit ucal.us/ACN for further details on upcoming webinars. Thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.